Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. This is our first annual Sports Psychology Committee webinar. So as you know, we will be discussing what is trending in the world of sports psychology. First off, though, thank you to Tammy Magaro for helping make this possible. And of course, thank you to Dr. Kimberly Wagner, Dr. Shira Oretzky, and Mr. Brian Alexander for volunteering their time to talk with us tonight. So just so everybody knows, the webinar will be recorded tonight. So first of all, to begin, you're probably wondering who I am. My name is Michael Saleh. I am the co-chair of the Sports Psychology Committee with Dr. Kimberly Wagner. I'm a recently licensed psychologist pursuing a career in sports psychology with the inspiration and guidance from the three panelists you will be hearing from in just a few minutes. So just to give a brief idea of the structure, so each panelist is going to have their own speaking segment to discuss their unique experiences, and I will introduce each of them before they start. They have also made PowerPoint slides available that they're going to do with screen sharing for more information about themselves and the field, so you don't necessarily have to, or so you can refer to those either during or after the presentation. Finally, we will conclude with a question and answer for the panelists. So as the presentation is moving forward, you'll see at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A box and a separate chat box. Please ask those questions in the Q&A box. I'll be monitoring those, and then at the end, I'll be choosing some questions and opening it up to the panelists to address them. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the first panelist. So my fellow chair, Kimberly Wagner. She is a licensed clinical psychologist and sports psychologist in San Diego. And she currently has a private practice in Solana Beach and has worked with student athletes at Sdsu, UCSD, and Cal State San Marcos. So she has presented her research on the impact of the mental skills and characteristics that help enhance performance in Major League Baseball players, both at international and national conferences. She is also an adjunct faculty member who teaches master's level sports psychology courses at National University. And Kimberly, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much, Michael. All right, hello everyone. I'm Dr. Kimberly Wagner. I think Michael did a good job at introducing my topic and what I'm going to be talking about today. And so let me just get my slides up there. Okay. So as you can see, the title of tonight's webinar is The Field of Sports Psychology, What's Trending and How to Get Involved. So what I'm going to be talking a little bit about is kind of what my path was to getting into the field of sports psychology, as well as what are some kind of general guidelines that you can follow. And then the other presenters will be talking about their experience as well, since all of ours have been slightly different. So you can kind of get a different perspective. So we do get a lot of questions from people that ask, well, what kind of training program should I go to? Because there's master's programs, there's doctorate programs, there's clinical programs. There's programs that are specifically geared towards sports psychology. And so people kind of think, well, what program should I go to? One of the things that you definitely need to be thinking about first is making sure that you go to a university or attend a program that's accredited. So without having a degree from an accredited university, it may be difficult for you to get internships, for you to get certain jobs, such as the U.S. Olympic Training Centers. If you do decide to go the licensing route, it could be difficult for you to get licensed if you do not go to an accredited university. There's also master's programs and doctorate programs. So the main difference is just the number of years of the program. Typically, master's programs are about 2 years, and the doctorate programs are anywhere from 4 years plus. So it really is a big time difference. And so that's just a personal decision that some people need to consider for themselves. Also, as I mentioned, there are some programs that are maybe more geared towards clinical psychology, but do have a sports psychology component as a part of the program. But there are other programs that are specifically sports psych, and they may have a clinical piece to them as well. So it's really just, more so what the emphasis is. One of the things that Shira and I have talked about is that because we have a degree and a license in clinical psychology, during this pandemic, when there's been no sports, it has been nice to use our clinical skills as a backup, because a lot of our athletes we haven't been seeing over the last couple of months since they haven't been competing. So just something to think about. But again, that's not for everybody. And another thing to consider is that if you do have a private practice, the sports psychology cases that you may have at your practice, they may not be covered by insurance. So in order to bill insurance, you have to have a clinical diagnosis. And sometimes with the sports psych cases, you don't have that, and therefore the person cannot use their insurance. So I just list a couple of things. These are some really good places to find some information regarding what colleges and universities offer sports psychology degrees. And so as Dr. Saleh said, that you can have the slides at the end of the presentation if you miss it now. So let's say you are in your program, and what are some other ways that you can potentially get involved in the field of sports psychology? So one of the things that I did is I did my dissertation research in sports psychology. So as Dr. Saleh mentioned, my title was working with Major League Baseball players on what mental skills enhance performance at the major league level. And so reading all the literature for my dissertation really helped to give me a solid background in the field of sports psychology and the research and mental skills, reading from some of the biggest names in the game, Harvey Dorfman, Ken Ravizza. So it was really good to get that background. Another good thing is to seek out internships that have the ability to incorporate sports psychology. So for example, if you get an internship at a college university setting, that you can form a relationship with the athletic department, or the clinical department may already have a relationship with the athletic department. So that's another way that you can get some applied experience. Internships that specifically focus on sports psychology are kind of rare. There are some universities that offer sports psychology internships, but the majority of graduate programs, you have to create an internship in sports psychology. So, if you have some kind of personal connection, that might be easier for you, but if not, that could be more difficult. So something to think about. A lot of graduate students may find it easier to get training through a clinical psychology internship. Like I said, the university counseling center or even a crisis center. You can also look at the Association of Psychology Postdoctoral and Internship Centers, so APIC, for internships that could incorporate sports psychology. So again, this is just a link to some potential sports psychology internships that's provided by the Association of Applied Sports Psychology. And I'll talk in a little bit more detail about what that is, but there's the link. So what is the Association for Applied Sports Psychology? For short, we call it ASP. one of the things that was recommended to me when I was showing an interest in sports psychology is affiliating myself with a professional organization such as ASP. It's a good way to meet other practitioners. I attended the annual conference. That's another good way to really introduce yourself to other people, see what's going on in the current research, get an idea of, you know, what kind of work you could be doing, and networking yourself. One of the benefits of becoming a member of ASP is that you can also get an additional certification. So it's called the CMPC, Certified Mental Performance Coach. And both Dr. Oretzky and Brian Alexander both have that certification. And so that is just, again, another thing that you can add to your resume to show that you have specific training in sports psychology. The other thing is the SDPA Sports Psychology Committee meetings. So those will be led by Dr. Saleh and myself, and hopefully through this we'll get a better idea of what people would like, but that's another way to get involved in sports psychology. And so Dr. Jeff Jones and Dr. Sharon Colgan actually started that quite a few years ago, and they ran the Sports Psychology Committee for a long time. And then for a few years, Dr. Oretzky and myself were the co-chairs, and then now Dr. Saleh and myself are the co-chairs. So please feel free to reach out to Dr. Saleh or myself if you have any questions or you would like to start attending the meetings.
All right. Oh, go ahead.
So just a little bit about professional titles. So sports psychologist versus mental coach, or another title. So a sports psychologist is typically for somebody that is a licensed psychologist in California. So what that means is that you must have a license through your state in order to refer to yourself as a psychologist, and then more specifically a sports psychologist. And then just also a part of APA as well, you have to demonstrate proficiency in the practice of sports psychology, so doing coursework, doing supervised experience, and also doing the Association for Applied Sports Psychology certification. And if you do have that certification through ASP, they have their own ethics code. And it's similar to the APA ethics code, but it's geared specifically towards sports and athletes and situations that you might encounter with that population. If you have a master's degree or you're not licensed in California, you cannot refer to yourself as a sports psychologist, but you can use other titles such as mental skills coach. We get this question a lot. Should I get my license? You can, but you don't have to. So unlike clinical psychology, the current laws and ethics don't require you to be licensed if you are practicing sports psychology. However, it can benefit you in a couple of ways. And the downfall to not being licensed, again, you cannot refer to yourself as a sports psychologist. And also, it may show just a lack of credibility when applying to certain jobs. So some jobs may require you to have a license, others may not. So you may just want to look into what type of job do I want, and do I actually need a license? So again, there's other career opportunities available for graduates in sports psychology other than doing private practice. So as Dr. Saleh said, I primarily do private practice, work one-on-one with athletes, and that's what I prefer, but there's many different things that you can do. So the field of sport and performance psychology is definitely growing. So as we've mentioned, working in universities or school settings, working with professional teams, coaches, club teams, they use a lot of the same practices in the military, also in some nonprofit work. And even though, you know, I may see an athlete in my office, there's oftentimes a clinical piece to the case. And so that's where my clinical background comes in help. But I also work with other people, such as like in the performing arts, musicians, ballet, business leaders, surgeons that do risky surgery, litigation attorneys, anybody that has a high pressure job or career to perform at a high level consistently. So I'm just going to briefly talk about how I got into the field of sports psychology. And as I mentioned, I want Brian and Dr. Oretzky to also share their experience, since it's slightly different. And I guess mine started in childhood growing up. I was a competitive athlete. When I got to the college level, I decided to give up athletics because I really wanted to focus on my academics. I always knew that I wanted to pursue a doctorate in clinical psychology. So I thought, you know what, let me just put my efforts towards academics. And I really hadn't even heard of the field of sports psychology when I was growing up and competing. I wish I had. I probably would have been a lot better, but you know, I think it turned out okay the way that it did. But so I majored in psychology in undergraduate school, and then I attended Alliant International University, CSPP, in San Diego. And that was where I attended a life-changing presentation by one of my greatest mentors, Dr. Stephen Bucky. He gave a presentation that he was working with the San Diego Chargers, and he just kind of asked, you know, what are some skills and characteristics that enhance performance in professional football players. And so I remember after that presentation, I called my dad and I was so excited about it. And my dad said, you know what? He said, you love sports and you love psychology. You should go into the field of sports psychology. And so I just kind of had this epiphany moment. And it was from that moment on that I just continued to pursue it. And so luckily, Dr. Bucky agreed to be the chair of my dissertation. And then I also had two other well-known people in the field, Dr. Ronald Stoberg, who was on my chair, one of my committee members, and then also Dr. Ben Strack, who graduated from Alliant San Diego, but now does a lot of work in Orange County. And so did my dissertation, and luckily I was able to get all my participants and everything. And then at the same time, I was also interning at California State University, San Marcos. And so there I had an opportunity to work directly with one of the supervisors who had an interest in sports psychology. We had a sports psychology consultation group meeting every week at the university that was separate from the clinical consultation group. So that was really helpful. I got to apply what I was learning. I also joined the SDPA Sports Psychology Committee group. So that was how I met Dr. Jones and Dr. Colgan and also Dr. Oretzky. So that was great because I got to see what they were doing in their practices. And then right after I graduated from graduate school, I started my own practice. And so just one of my areas of specialty being sport and performance psychology. So that's my story.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Kimberly. For educating us more about the field, how you got into it, as well as your unique path. And I think everyone will see as Dr. Oretzky and Brian speak that there are multiple inroads into this field, and everybody, at least everyone that I have spoken with, has a different story about how they got into the field. So I hope that you take away a good idea of how to get into it yourself if you're interested. All right, well, with the interest of time, we'll go right on to Brian. So Brian Alexander, he is a certified mental performance consultant with the Association for Applied Sports Psychology, as Dr. Wagner mentioned earlier. So he serves the psychological performance needs of youth athletes all the way up to Olympic competitors. And one of his primary roles has been supporting the USA men's Olympic national water polo team players during practices, competitions, travels, you name it. He is also the co-founder of the Well You mental training app and podcast, which I believe he will make available to the attendees. He has also served as an adjunct faculty member in JFK's and National University's sports psychology programs. So that is Brian, and I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Dr. Saleh, and thank you, Dr. Wagner, for providing such a rich introduction into the field of sports psychology. I think that really opens up the door for me to just dive in and share my role and how we got into the field. So let me share my screen here. Okay. Hopefully you all can see that now. Yes, as Dr. Wagner illustrated so well, there's many different ways to arrive in the world of sports psychology and working with athletes and teams and performers, even outside of the athletic realm. My route is a little bit different in terms of where I landed and the academic path that I took. So I chose to go the applied route rather than the academic route. I earned my master's degree in sports psychology from John F. Kennedy University. It's actually just recently gone online, but they have two routes within the program. You can take the research track or the applied track, and there's even a PsyD dual degree option. And as I was going through the program, I was considering taking that doctorate road, but my athletic experience, I think, kind of helped me realize that there's a lot of need in this field of applied sports psychology and being able to meet people where they're at. So I chose that route, and I'll give you guys a little bit more info into that path a little bit, as well as some principles of my practice and how I work with the clients that I have. And then we'll get into some more of the nitty gritty in working with clients, especially from a mental coach perspective. And, actually going through grad school, that was one of the biggest challenges, is like, what do I call myself? I can't use this title of psychologist or sports psychologist or have reference to it because I'm not a licensed practitioner, especially in the state of California. And, that's a reserved term for those who have earned that level of training and licensure. So I landed on the titles mental coach or even mental skills coach. And my website is athlete mental skills coach or athlete mental coach. You can reach my website by both those routes.com. And I did through John F. Kennedy, it's a great program because they built in the required hours that you need for certification through ASP, which is the Association for Applied Sports Psychology. They've built in those hours into the graduate program, so you earn them through your second year of the program. So I came out of there and dove right into the practice. Before that, though, I was an athlete. I played collegiately. I played water polo at UC Santa Barbara, undergraduate major in psychology, but I was an athlete. I was basically pursuing my dream of becoming an Olympian. And I played on every national level team there was in the sport, from youth through juniors. Started traveling to Europe every single summer, playing and competing against all other countries around the world, and then finally landed at the US team. And while I kind of explained that transition really smoothly, it was not smooth. It was not at all as easy as it sounds, and I had a lot of really challenging moments, which opened my eyes really to the mental side of performance firsthand, and realizing that myself, I needed to work with a sports psychologist, which I started actually tapping into a little bit in college. I worked with our counseling and psychological services department through my sophomore year through a really low period, and also found the benefits just in my own personal life, because I think one of the things that I've found is the skills, and everyone here probably knows this, but the skills that we teach, they're really life skills, just translated through the language of sport. And I think that's something that's really important in terms of my practice and working with athletes, is I'm trying to really be person first and athlete second focused. But you know, to end my athletic story, I was the last one cut for 2 Olympic Games, and I made every other tournament there is. I mean, Pan American Games, won gold medal to qualify for the Olympics, and the coach chose somebody else the next year at the London Olympic Games. So I finished my note kind of on a sour point, but at the same time, I learned a lot through the journey, and I think that's what I take away from it mostly. And coming out of sport, I worked in a business world before going and pursuing a master's degree in sports psychology, but I worked for the Ken Blanchard companies, who, you know the name Ken Blanchard. He's, you know, written 60, 70 plus books by now on management and leadership and organizational behavior. So I was introduced to the world of, you know, people development from a business standpoint when I finished my athletic career, but I just decided I want to work with athletes. So I went back to school, did it full time, working full time, just, you know, online, and earned my degree, and then went on for certification when I finished. So like I said, I attended UC Santa Barbara, but I've had the opportunity now to work with UC Santa Barbara, for example, just presenting a keynote to some of the athletes there. And it's been a pretty interesting ride for me, not knowing if I could make it, just jumping on my own and hearing how difficult it was. But I think something that helped me, like I said, in that choice in deciding, do I want to go the doctorate degree, or do I want to just go the applied route in the master's level? I just leveraged my network, and that's something that I was able to have a real advantage around personally. So I've even gone back to the Pan American Games and with Team USA. This last year in Lima, Peru, helped them win the gold medal. So we're qualified for next summer's Olympic Games now. But it's been an interesting ride for me, full circle, once being a member of the team, taking a quad off. Basically, after 2012, I took a quad, which is the 4-year cycle between Olympic Games, and figured out, okay, I really want to go in the sports psychology world. And then once I got in, I found a way to work with water polo players, which, by the way, that's probably the hardest population for myself to work with, because I know too much, and that's something about the sport. And that's something that I've really had to check myself ethically around, and I'll talk about that later. But I think that's one of the main challenges in knowing a sport versus not knowing a sport, and being able to kind of maintain your role and stay focused on who your client is, as well as, making sure you know how to defer questions around training and skills, sports skills and things, to the right person in that role. So yeah, Pan American Games, I've working with Team USA. I would probably just have gotten back from Tokyo. However, it's been postponed for another year, and that's been an interesting ride, switching to virtual meetings with our team and not having a full year's worth of travel. But next year, hopefully, fingers crossed, it looks like we're going to be traveling the entire year pretty much, preparing for the Tokyo Games next July and August. I've also worked pretty extensively with a lot of high school athletes, both as, here's a picture of me working with a team, but also individually in all different sports, It's kind of just evolved. I mean, I think it's been interesting though, a lot of sports I had no knowledge about. Like, for example, one of my first clients was a fencer, a pretty highly competitive fencer. And I had to actually dig up the language around the sport, go on USA Fencing's website, learn about the different terms, and try and know enough to be dangerous in order to just have a conversation with the athlete and know what are the right questions to ask and what's the right things to listen for, and how can I help them in terms of improving their understanding and their ownership over their performance. But yeah, that's been an interesting ride. And a lot of times in the field too, kind of think about what's our ideal population to work with and age. And I've found that I've worked with anywhere from athletes that are 9 years old all the way up to, I got to travel out to Death Valley. I get to travel out to Death Valley, and here's a picture in 121-degree heat with a runner at the Badwater Ultra Marathon. 54-year-old, I think he might be 55 years old now, but I mean, some of these experiences that I've been able to have just going and being on the support team of these athletes has been amazing. And you know, I think one of the biggest challenges, especially in the water polo world, but in anywhere I go, is how can I not be seen? How can I be in the background, or as you know, one of the people that Dr. Wagner's referenced, Ken Revisa, he always said, hide in the shadows. How can you just be in the shadows? And that's been really challenging for me, but I've had a great opportunity, and some of the athletes are just so outright too, you know, they're willing to talk about you and share that you're working with them, or share that they have a mental coach, or all those things. So it's been a fun ride. But like I said, some of the principles of my practice are starting with meeting people where they're at emotionally, and sometimes going to them. It's not always in an office. A lot of times you're out on the field, you're on the court, you're at the pool, you're on a bus. A lot of especially traveling with the team, a lot of conversations happen on the bus before and after practice and games, or even on the plane, at the hotel, figuring out the right space, mapping that all out once you arrive, having boundaries. I mean, there's a lot of things there on the physical side when you're not in a controlled setting, but then obviously psychologically and cognitively too. So trying to just understand them, using a lot of ongoing assessment, both observation, semi-structured, structured, lots of ways, lots of tools there. But one of the things I think for me that's really important in modeling is being a lifelong learner in the field, as well as other fields, so that I can be creative, be innovative, be able to kind of facilitate or explain or educate the same skill, but maybe in two totally different ways. So that's a real big important one. And then understanding too that, you know, it takes time to build that relationship. And so focusing on that, saying, you know, people won't care how much I know until they know how much I care. And so just going slow rather than jumping to, oh, this is the thing you need to practice your self-talk right now. Maybe I just need to listen a little bit more. And definitely that's different depending on the age and development level of the individual or the team. And then one big piece here that comes up a lot, especially as we call them the gatekeepers, the people that hire you for your services. They're trying to see, is this worth it, right? How do you measure your effectiveness? And I think it's usually from the strength of the bond that you have and the ownership of the client, giving them the ownership of their process. So I think that's a really important piece to help coaches understand and create buy-in around, and even speak through the coaches sometimes, because you know, I can't do it all alone, but at the same time they realize I'm sort of coming in as the expert on this mental side of things, and I want to work with them rather than opposed. So and then couple other things here. It'd be great, you know, to work yourself out of a job a lot of times, because then the client is basically doing their thing and feeling empowered. And oh, sorry, jumping ahead here. Feeling empowered, which doesn't sound ideal, but at the same time, I think it's part of the field, and you realize that it's not all about you. It's about the people that you serve. And then lastly is just maintaining my own athletic experience, my own exercise, modeling and what I preach, and exploring it within myself and through competition. So I'm a master's level athlete now, and I've actually gone and played in Masters World Championships, which has been a lot of fun, traveling still and playing sport on my own. So working with clients, I take a very humanistic approach. It's very empathic, non-judgmental, genuine, but focus on performance enhancement and well-being. And I'll talk in a second about how my role coincides with the role of mental health clinicians. But again, person first, athlete second, focusing on that authenticity, being genuine while collaborative, right? And like one of the things I first say with clients when I'm having my introductory intake meetings is, you know, one of my goals is to get you to speak more than 50% of the time. Because a lot of times they'll come in and be asking me, like, what should I do? How do I do this? And it's my job to use those good questioning skills and active listening skills to pull it out of them. So, but sometimes that's honest in a direct way. Other times it's honest in another way, while producing that environment where they feel safe and they can basically fail and know, hey, look, you're going to be able to keep going and not be judged or pigeonholed. And sometimes with teams, that's pretty challenging too, when you're working with a coaching staff that doesn't buy in the same way. So it's a mixture of cognitive behavioral therapy or theory approaches, acceptance commitment theory, psychoeducation, you know, either in a traditional learning environment, an experiential learning environment, or a consultative learning environment. So, you know, with teams, we do a lot of team exercises, team building, as well as just open dialogue and being able to share experiences and lean on each other to, you know, feel like you're a part of something more than just yourself there. The way I do it is focusing on connecting, assessing, addressing things, customizing plans, organizing information, reflecting, and then adapting. I think, you know, if I structured my sessions individually, I'd always start with a check-in, and then we go into any direction the client wants to go if they have a direction, or we pick up off where we left the last time. My first session always is kind of going over a questionnaire, pre-session questionnaire that I developed around how they see their strengths and weaknesses and goals they have, as well as past life events and experiences. But the idea is that we want to create your unique mental toolbox and your own performance language. So that could be a mantra, that could be self-talk cues, that could be reset routines, all kinds of stuff. But, you know, we're really just trying to partner in high performance models for teams. And sometimes, you know, working with teams, I'll really connect with the athletic trainers, the sports med, working here with the local university, and we're getting our model in order in terms of how do we support the main client. That's always the athlete. And sometimes those lines get blurred a little bit. So making sure you keep checking with yourself and making sure, hey, even if coaches are asking you, hey, what's going on, or parents of athletes that are hiring you, right? I usually try and put the athlete as the main person there. But then also having a really solid network of clinical referrals and knowing my boundaries. It's been great to work with the San Diego Sports Psychology Associates group. There's an instant group there, of a network there, and that's local, that I can refer people to that might demonstrate some behavior that seems like this might be a little bit outside of my scope of practice, and I'll shepherd the referral and help them along, or nutritionists, or even, other people. So I think it's a real team approach in some ways. However, it is me staying in my lane and working with clients in the way that I'm trained, as well as the way that they're expecting, and I educate them on that sometimes. So I think this is a real big one that's coming up more and more often. I definitely in the mainstream media with professional athletes, but mental health is something that I think we all have. I think it's something that's really important to understand. It's not only just when you have mental health issues and that term comes up. It's just something that you're working on, you're working with, similar to your physical health. And so my role as a mental coach is kind of on the front end of this spectrum, this mental health spectrum almost, and realizing like, okay, we're going to be proactive. We're going to work on skills. We're going to work on mental training. We're going to work on coping skills, right? We're going to work through the stress. We're going to preview a lot of situations you might come into using imagery, visualization, even reflective practices, journaling, and tying in those tangible skills of breathing and self-talks, strategies, all kinds of that stuff. But that's on the front end, but then overlapping a little bit and helping on the back end if needed, right? And keeping my eyes open and really observing and listening for those subtle cues, and even asking for peer support too from all those other people in the clinical world for things that I'm really not sure about. So I see my role as a mental coach as performance enhancement and well-being through mental training and sport-specific mental skills. I see the mental health clinician's role as clinical support for behavior and general functioning as presenting issues have severity changes, dysfunction, or there's more trauma, and that's usually a lot of these red flag situations that pop up. There can definitely be some precursors to those, and so kind of having my foot on the pulse of those things and listening and just being able to really assess in an ongoing way. And like I said, this is a really key point for me right here, is just having that overlap of people that I can lean on and work with. Like for example, last summer at World Championships, we had a pretty serious incident out there, and just the entire staff from the USOPC, we all just immediately bound together. It was really cool team atmosphere to see how do we support these athletes that really need it right now. How do we follow up with support and providing the tools they need and the resources they need, and learning a lot in that process too. So I think this is a really important thing for me, and it continues to develop, right? I'm continuing to learn about it. Lastly, so I've kind of alluded to a lot of these ethical challenges that I face, especially being in the field and traveling a lot with athletes and not being in a I work on this, and like, what does your coach say? So being able to like not push them away and abuse kind of maybe some of that relationship or that trust you built, but be able to just redirect them in the right route is a art in itself. As well as working with the gatekeepers, the coach, the parents, the maintaining the athlete confidentiality. That's a challenge. Multiple relationships with athletes, and then just sport competency compared to the coaching staff, like I said, and then multiple roles with the athletes and the staff. That's challenging too when you travel and you're kind of like off the clock, but you're really not off the clock ever. It's like a 6 a.m. to a 10 p.m. job when you're traveling abroad and staying in a hotel and all that. And then also use of technology and social media, texting, when to text, who's surrounding them when they receive text, when you receive text, Where does the information go? Really, I don't really share information about who I work with or anything around social media. But one of the things here, the picture I put here, was after the Pan American Games, I get embarrassed by this story, but like I said, trying to hide in the shadows is tough for me. You read the title there, it says men's water polo is Tokyo bound, and look whose picture is there. That was an email blast to everybody subscribed to the US Olympic Committee newsletters. And I don't know why they thought my picture worked well in their database, but for some reason, after our team had just won the gold medal in the Pan American Games to qualify for the Tokyo Olympics coming up, they chose to put me in there. And that's just one of these things that I think I'll never forget. And all the players just laughed about it, and it was fine, but still it's so embarrassing for me. And I think part of it, they saw me, the USOC people saw me there. Some of them knew me from my athletic experience, and it was just one of these unavoidable ethical dilemmas. But it happened. These things happen, so I always think, how I deal with it afterwards is probably more important than trying to run away from it completely. Even though I try to prevent. Lastly, one of the projects that we have going on, and Dr. Saleh alluded to it, but we have a mental training app for athletes and performers, and my partner and I, Ami Stratton-Belanoff, we found that athletes, especially people that can't afford our services, still need mental training, and athletes even that we work with need it on the go rather than just when we meet, right? Pre-game, post-game, pre-practice, post-practice. They're struggling with something at home, so we put together this app called WellU Mental Training, and we're just trying to make a difference in the world of athletics and performance and provide more resources. So if you guys want to check that out, you can. Thank you.
All right, Brian, we really appreciate your insights, especially, giving us a great idea of just the in the trenches work that you're doing. And you really highlighted the flexibility, the ability to adapt is really important, that I think that all the attendees, I think, will see is really vital to being successful in this field, like the three panelists have been. So moving on to Dr. Shira Oretzky, real quick. She's a local clinical and sports psychologist. She developed the first student-athlete mental health and wellness program with the Sdsu athletics department. And she currently serves as a consultant to the University of San Diego athletic department and other athletic programs across the county. She is also in private practice, working with high school students up through professional students. And like Dr. Wagner, she has also presented her research at conferences across the nation. And without further ado, Shira, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. I want to just really express my gratitude to Dr. Wagner and Saleh for taking over the SDPA Sports Psychology Committee this year. It was started by Dr. Jones and Colgan, and they passed the torch down to Dr. Wagner and I, and I'm really looking forward to all of the things that they have in store for you this year. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So I wanted to start with this quote because sport, I think, is such a powerful platform. I know it was an integral part of my development growing up and has really been the foundation of my professional career as well. So I also wanted to kind of just, before we go any further, see who on this call in the audience is also former athletes themselves. So if you can go ahead and just kind of raise your hand and go ahead and add in, please put what sport you participated in. Let's see what sports we have represented here. I know we have water polo, we have baseball. Any other sports that you guys have participated in? Okay, well, thank you for sharing. So I'm often asked, how did I get into the field of sports psychology? When I was 4 years old, I was full of energy, and my parents enrolled me in a gymnastics class. They thought it would be a great place for me to kind of channel my energy. And I just absolutely loved it. And I just wanted to be just like Mary Lou Retton, and I wanted to win a gold medal in the Olympics. And I can't tell you how many hours I spent in the gym over the years to be able to compete at that high level. The dedication gave me really the physical skills I needed, but staying calm under pressure during gymnastics meets didn't always come as easily. So sometimes during a meet, I would be, really tuned in the zone, kind of with a laser beam focus, but other times I would be kind of off. I would be nervous, I'd have a stomach ache, and that really, made it difficult for me to focus. And as a kid, it's hard to figure out, okay, what's off when something's not working. And I started to kind of question and work with my coaches to figure out, okay, well, if I can train my body to be able to perform physically, is there a way I could train my mind too? And is there a way that I could, train my nerves to stay calm under pressure? And, this really planted a seed in me to go on and explore the connection between mindset and performance. And it's developed into a lifelong passion of studying psychology, really understanding the underpinnings of the mind and the nervous system and kind of how these can work in sync. And while I never went on to win an Olympic gold, so to speak, in my sport, I've had the honor of helping other athletes to really reach their dreams and their Olympic goals as well. So just to give you a little bit of background about my training, I got my doctorate in clinical psychology, and as part of my doctoral dissertation, I looked at the effects of yoga on depressive and somatic symptoms in young adults. And this research really solidified kind of my preconceived notions about the mind and body, and provided really that scientific confirmation of how the two can work together in unison to really help individuals to be able to perform their best and to support overall well-being. And it's really been the foundation of how I work with my clients. I like to work from kind of a more holistic perspective, looking at the whole athlete, and really also incorporate psychophysiology, which I'll get into talking a little bit more about. So when, after I graduated, I did my postdoctoral fellowship at San Diego State University in the counseling center there. And I started to see some student athletes there. And I found that I was able, because of my sport background myself, I was able to really develop rapport pretty easily. I could understand where they were coming from and understand their mindset and their needs. And it was interesting because at the same time, I also saw student athletes as an underserved population. Being a Division I basketball player or football player, it looks pretty glamorous on the outside, but it's not always the same behind the scenes. Being in the limelight isn't always easy. I think, as the other speakers had mentioned, it's a strenuous job being an athlete. They're waking up at 5, 6 a.m. and going for 12 hours a day between practice, weights, rehab, class, meetings. I'm sure there's many student athletes on the call right now, and this is probably preaching to the choir. And that's not even accounting for, being on the road and traveling, as well as keeping up with friendships and family and kind of those social relationships as well. There's really, being a student athlete, there's tremendous pressure to stay on the top of their game, both physically and mentally. And so what I started to really notice is the need for support was high and the utilization of services was low. When you look at the stats at the university level, what you see is that athletes experience mental health issues at about the same rate as their non-athlete peers, but they reach out at much, much lower rates. And so often they're missing care that would be so beneficial to them. If you look at these stats briefly here, what you see is that 52 females and 33 male student athletes felt overwhelming anxiety over the last 12 months. These stats are pre-COVID. They may be higher even now. And then if you look over here, have you ever felt so depressed it was difficult to function? A quarter of student athletes reported yes. And what's even more alarming, if you look down here, is that suicide is the third leading cause of fatalities among student athletes. Very concerning. And so I wanted to really understand, if the need's so high, why is the utilization so low? And I think a lot of it had to do with stigma in the sport culture. There's this toughing it out, persisting through pain mentality. And some of that can be good. Some of this persistence and determination really helps athletes to be successful, but it also makes it hard to reach out for help. And I think what I noticed was that athletes are much more comfortable reaching out to their strength and conditioning coach, their athletic trainer, around physical issues, but it was much less comfortable around mental health issues. And so I really became passionate about this. I thought it was so important to, really begin to address this. I thought that we need to we have a serious issue here, and it's important to really change the culture around this so it could be more mainstream. Just the same way an athlete would reach out to their athletic trainer, why not work on some of these mental skills? Why not work on some of the performance enhancement areas to help them being their best, and also to really support their wellness? So I did a lot of the work in the beginning was just around educating athletic departments, directors, coaches about this area. And, what was great is about 7 or 8 years ago, you started to see initiatives popping up more and more. So the US OPC and Team USA started talking more openly about athlete mental health and wellness. Professional leagues such as the MLB, NBA, and NFL, they all have their director of mental health and wellness now, and directory. And so I think that the idea started to shift. We got a more comprehensive view of what is optimal health and performance. And and it began to encompass both the physical and the mental. And I think starting to really see the importance of player well-being. And I think what's happened is, as you see it happening at an organizational level, that kind of trickled down, and it helps, individual players themselves. Like I have a video here that you guys can look up, which I think is a great public service. DeMar DeRozan, Kevin Love, I'm not sure if you guys have seen the videos or heard them speak out openly, but they really just, talk about the importance of it. I know Michael Phelps has done a big push in this area too. And as they open up and talk more about this publicly, it really sets the stage for other people to follow suit as well. The NCAA has been on the forefront of this for a number of years as well. Dr. Brian Hainline, who's the chief medical officer for the NCAA, he really did a huge push when he came in, and has made mental health one of the main strategic priorities for student athletes. You know, he says, in this day and age, we can no longer separate excellence and wellness. And I think that's such a good quote, because what you see is, you know, when you support student athlete mental health and well-being, when people are feeling good, they're going to be thriving and they're going to be performing their best. So if we can kind of look at this from more of a comprehensive approach, we really have the best possibility to be able to support our athletes. The nice part was, as the you know, as the NCAA came out with this really supported some of the work that I was already in the works of doing at Sdsu, and it, you know, it helped kind of, you know, shine a light on how important this issue was. So I had the opportunity to, you know, develop the student athlete mental health and wellness program. This was in collaboration with the athletics department, athletics medicine, and we did this in accordance with the NCAA best practices. And what we did is create this multidisciplinary team. So we had sports psych, we had, you know, physicians, we had athletic trainers, academic advisors, and work together as kind of this comprehensive team to be able to really provide wraparound care. And then we did, you know, we did programming. I created this program called Wellness Wednesdays, and part of what the initiative was to be able to kind of connect with athletes around sports psychology and mental health from the ground up. So it was kind of a proactive approach, and we wanted to make it fun as well and create that connection. So I started that about 6 years ago, and it was a 3-week wellness program and sports psychology program for all incoming freshmen and transfer athletes at SDSU. So it was about 55 to 75 student athletes each year, and we would you know, talk about performance enhancement techniques. We would talk about, we would make it fun and do interactive activities. And then it also helped them to really familiarize themselves with myself and my team. So, and we noticed that really helped. So when they, you know, when athletes knew who I was, it was much easier if something came up later down the line. Oh, go see Shira, you remember her from the summer program, as opposed to, you know, there's a woman across campus that you may have never met before, but you could talk to her. So that really helped kind of bridge that connection. I'm gonna show you a quick video of some of the work so that you can, you know, have a sense of it. And you'll see at the end too, a unique piece of the program that I thought was really effective is that we had upperclassmen, student athletes. They served as mentors. So they were peer educators in the program, teacher assistants. And then for the final workshop, what we did is we had a panel, which was also Q&A with athletes that were, you know, senior level. And that helped a lot because it's one thing for us to kind of stand up there and, you know, be able to say, this is gonna, you know, these are the skills that are gonna really help you be your best self as a college athlete here. It's a whole different thing for them to hear it from their peers. I think that was really effective. And then that also really helped to create kind of this mentorship role between, you know, the freshmen and the upperclassmen mentors throughout the year. Can you hear? So that gives you a little bit of a sample of what some of the workshops were like. I want to just kind of end by talking a little bit about a final program that I created along with Dr. Doucette at SDSU. And I've been asked to speak a little bit about tonight, and I think this kind of brings it full circle. So I clearly had an interest in psychophysiology and kind of understanding how the nervous system works in terms of performance. I think in the past, sports psychology has been heavily focused on the mind and how do we kind of think positive or think in a constructive way to help our performance. But I think it's becoming a little bit more comprehensive as well, which is how do I physically stay calm under pressure? Because if I can center myself, that's going to give me the best chance of being able to kind of manage activation levels and to be able to focus in the moment. And so Dr. Doucette had created a biofeedback program at SDSU as part of his sabbatical project. And I had the idea of expanding it to student athletes as well. And so as part of that initiative, I invited Dr. Lindsay Thornton down from the Olympic Training Center to talk to our staff as well as the athletic department about how she's using psychophysiology to help Olympic athletes. And that event was also sponsored by SDPA, and some of you guys may have had been in attendance for that. So, you know, I think biofeedback and psychophysiology approaches are ones that athletes can really resonate. They love to see results. They love to see kind of concrete data. And so I think biofeedback speaks to that. What you can see here is part of the program. So we hook them up with sensors, and then that's connected to a software on the screen, and then athletes are able to see their physiological responses to stress. So their heart rate, their respiration, muscle tension, things of that nature. And through diaphragmatic breathing and centering practices, they're able to concretely calm down the nervous system. It helps them to, you know, become more self-aware of what's going on and feel like they have a tool in their tool belt to be able to regulate their anxiety and their nerves, so to speak, under pressure. And so some of the work that I've done with this is, you know, starting in the office, learning the breathing strategies, and then eventually kind of moving that out onto the field or court and using it more practically. I also recommend some apps to athletes, and these are a list of them. And this, you know, really helps for a home practice as well. So just in closing, you know, I stepped away from SDSU last year, and I've now moved into full-time private practice and consulting, and I'm working with Dr. Jeff Jones, who's a previous sport psych committee chair and has been my mentor for many years. We've collaborated now on a program at USD Athletics. He's been there for a number of years before me, and I've stepped in now, and we're kind of expanding that in collaboration with athletics medicine. And I've also had the opportunity to work, you know, more specifically with different organizations performing at a high level now around San Diego. So I just want to say, you know, I am so grateful to have been able to find a career path that I'm both so passionate about and feel so rewarded by. My clients are some of the most driven, hardworking, determined individuals I've ever met, and it is such a privilege to be able to kind of step into the trenches with them and help them work through mental blocks, help them to kind of overcome their fears and to really, you know, develop a confidence in themselves to go out and be able to perform their best in their sport, but also in their life in general. And, you know, that's really been my gold medal. So I want to say to all of you who are interested in the field, you know, this is a really exciting time to be involved as the field's unfolding and emerging. And I'm going to turn it back to Michael now for the Q&A, and so that we can answer some questions that you have about our work with athletes or getting involved. And I'm also really excited about, you know, the work that Dr. Wagner and Saleh are going to be doing, you know, to support that process. So thank you so much for having me this evening.
All right. It is absolutely our pleasure, Shira. Yeah, I mean, you've done tremendous work. And as one of the attendees pointed out, the work that you did at Sdsu was very impressive. And I'm confident that you will leave a very lasting impact on that program. So as some of you might have seen, we are about 10 minutes past 8. So if anybody needs to head out, that's totally fine. That includes Brian, Shira, and Kimberly as well. I totally want to respect your time and everybody else's. But for those who do want to stay, it looks like we still have about 45 people. So let's see. I got some great questions. I was able to answer some of them to people privately, and here I thought this was a great question to continue with. And either of the three panelists you are all can absolutely take it away. So the question is, in what direction do you see the field of sports psychology growing? In what ways do you think the field will change in the next 5 to 10 years? That's a great question.
I can take that on from my perspective, if you'd like.
Sure.
The one way that I think I see the field growing is, first of all, I mean, Dr. Oretzky alluded to the openness that some high-profile athletes, first, you know, have kind of expressed their struggles around mental health, and many organizations now, within the last 5 to 10 years, have really taken a strong approach to providing services within the NCAA, for example, or Major League Baseball or the NBA, Players Association, plus individual teams are hiring complete staffs. I mean, I think almost every Major League Baseball team has a staff of performance coordinators all the way down through every minor league team. So I think that's one way the field has definitely evolved and is growing. I also think that the inclusion of technology, such as biofeedback or even neurofeedback, that's going to continue to be more mainstream. You're seeing a lot of products being developed. I don't know about the efficacy of all those products, but the importance of understanding that there's ways to train mentally is something that's just gaining buy-in overall. And I think that more people are going to specialize, and it's going to be part of staffs. I mean, I know some people that are even on Olympic level teams, and they're just an assistant coach, but they're a sports psychologist in disguise. So I think it's going to become more mainstream in that sense, and professionals are going to be on staff more often.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for answering that question. And let's see. So again, and just as a reminder, yeah, this will be recorded. So again, if people need to leave, that's no problem. Let's go to. Okay, I think this is because you know, the three panelists, I'm sure, have done a lot of work directly with the coaching staff. And one of our attendees asked, is there a discussion in the community about the normalization of verbal abuse as an effective form of coaching? Yeah, great question. There's the coaching strategies have definitely been changing over the years. So yeah, Kimberly or Shira, would you like to take that one?
Can you actually ask that question again? I heard the part about the verbal abuse, but can you say the beginning part again, please?
Sure. Let me pull it up here. Okay. Is there a discussion in the community about the normalization of verbal abuse as an effective form of coaching? So I'm wondering if, yeah, that means like if like the, you know, the coaching strategies are changing away from kind of the more shame-based, you know, approach as opposed to where the field is going or where the coaching and our work is going.
So I can just speak to what I see individually in my practice. I definitely, because I work primarily with individuals. So oftentimes, I'd say the majority of the time, I don't get to meet the coach or even talk to the coach. Sometimes I do as a part of my work, but most of the time I don't. I do hear from the athletes that I work with about different coaching styles. Some of them appear to be very aggressive, and can be psychologically damaging to the athlete, both to their self-esteem, self-confidence, self-worth. And so what my job is to help the athlete to regain their self-confidence, regain their self-esteem. Maybe it's advocating for themselves to the coach, letting them know that that style of coaching is not a good fit for how they learn or how they grow. Sometimes they're not able to do that. So I just teach them how to overcome the negativity, positive self-talk, rational self-talk, reaching out to your support system who does support you in ways which help you to perform at your peak. I think there may be in the recent past has been like videos of coaches that, you know, we could call it verbal abuse of the athletes. And unfortunately, I do still hear of it in my practice. I don't know if you guys would have anything to add to that.
Yeah, no, certainly it's an evolving thing. Oh, go ahead, Shira.
I would say that athlete well-being is something that's being considered much more. And so I think things that, you know, may have been practices in the past are, you know, may be less effective at this time. And there is kind of a trend towards really better care of the athletes and what's most effective for them.
Great, thanks, Shira and Kimberly. Really appreciate those answers. So let's make this the last question. Shira, this will be for you. I think it definitely is right up your alley. So this attendee asked, let's see, in a university setting where attending sessions for athletes may be required by the athletics department or coaches, did you notice any pushback from the athletes? Or like maybe like any concerns about confidentiality, you know, sharing things with their coaches, seeing teammates, seeing them walk into your office. So if so, how did you navigate those issues?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and happy to hear from the other panelists as well if you have a perspective on it. But I think you really have to meet athletes where they're at. And, you know, if something is forced, it obviously is a little bit trickier. I saw in terms of my role, I saw it as building rapport, letting athletes know what services were available and what supports are in place, as well as really, I think one important piece is really explaining confidentiality. I think that is so important in terms of the work that we do. And, you know, we are, as licensed clinical psychologists, first and foremost, I'm, you know, bound by confidentiality and the laws and ethics around that. And so I think explaining that, what information is shared, what's not, checking with the athlete about that, I think that can, be an important piece and help athletes to feel more comfortable. Because I think sometimes in the sport organization, things are talked about, much more openly about, specific athletes. And so knowing that, at least in terms of the sports psychology setting, that's a private place where they can talk openly, and the information doesn't necessarily have to leave that room.
Thank you, Shira, for taking that question. So yeah, if you're interested, I'll also be sending out a survey in the next week or so, just to get an idea of everybody's impressions of the webinar. And if you are interested in coming to our next meeting or joining the Sports Psychology Committee, we would love to have you. And we would love, so part of the survey would be determined